As I said, we might put your comparison that something on this that was using that the current situation with them just is that can be about to deliver it and that one of the student candidate as well as chosen guard jungle that from that the cutting that for a scenario saying that even until that thing through that the entire paper about to get even the send showing that they gave the word to that jungle and the connection still not being able to that make it towards that jungle that the scenario that I'm looking at. And I'm looking like 21 guy that one factor also in that happening also being that 21 that happening to be being distracted through that villain's mindset taking over like the 21 guy to the point of language dealing up with that friend of Thanos and eliminating as many those players as they can that create a 21 guy to see that we have to playing James or in lack to the who's elimination and that we kill as well being created within the individual mind is the movement of the brain. So that's the loop. But for that junkie because he's surviving towards like the end of like the boss begin. And even once like the boss begin will be over like into the still until the next junkie because it's surviving. But like I'm looking that still once like the game would be over by the like I'm going to junkie would be like by the and yeah like junkie at that point from like the faint exhaust would be that getting eliminated is like the scenario that I'm going to survive that like after the 20 hours like the scenario that so that and that's referring it to the only once that the game would be possibility over that like I'm looking at certain people and die number different you do it making towards that the road like junkie would be respectable to the direction at that point I'm looking like meeting that then when I would see would be like an eliminated so the like some of us would get the right of plus like that rely on the work and let's see that fight itself like everything that then become guy will be able to that only see that normally that reflect from it then maybe able to like see what happened that then to that deliver so that in the at that point totally panicking and that you also getting encouraged that will be totally panicking and that could that will be getting so like then become guy would be that desperate to want to know things that able to see reflected and all that sense of scenario parameters. So by the number of that was like again, so you over by the next game of already sort of and into the post and might have taken the daily so that I'm looking that I think even the finally once again the job remaining at work that around that the daily is only it's like that a bit. Also, like my top the person right now that some could be against due to this like so kind of implement within that not being able to that bring that like eliminate play players that that literally hit not being able to say that until that the very end just like was now. So like I'm thinking as like time would be running extremely short. It would be at that point like a maybe while around like the time while maybe it's 10 seconds or like 20 seconds would be that by the time 20 seconds would be remaining I'm looking like at that point in total at that point song is taking some maybe feeling that basically he's definitely going to get eliminated because that's it. And but for even at that point, not being able to that bring himself to like eliminate another player, like the scenario that I'm saying. So like him, of course, like at that point, the something in the direction of would be at the mindset to that shown up to be able to like make it to the like it's like not would be and basically to for him to like at least even though at that point of the feeling that he's not being able to like just survive it. But like still he would want to like with that motivated time that he was having enough that he would be wanting to like ensure that his like amount of like survives that game. So that can be like that in that sense the intent that can be like the sense of and like frantically as like I'm doing maybe like has only 20 seconds to go in and like some full again that frantically running through the game or like the post game home like emails like area like trying to find like not a like person or that I'm going to so I'm going to like and that while only 10 seconds were remaining at that point is when number and then the announcement happening that uh, the exact number of the student candidate like who is eliminated that announcement happening and at that point I'm looking at the student candidate at that point would be absolutely shocked. It's like the scenario that I'm going to go in and at that point of the liberating unsuffering two possible scenarios that one scenario is for like the some student candidate from hearing like the announcement of like the elimination of like some of the student candidate like I'm looking at some student candidate instantly believing that and they will straight away going crazy and like will not being able to like, contain that the extreme emotion and at that point maybe I'm thinking that going crazy and like at that point that getting extremely enraged as well and basically him totally swinging at that point even when like him totally being like a uncontrollable manner, will be like swinging his left weapon and usually would be eliminating the point of that civilian candidate that would be that as time would be so like would be watching through that area trying to that surprise the game. So like at that point that the Indian candidate like the pattern using the left weapon and eliminating both the going crazy and that way eliminating both the players as well. And that way, that the game of those like eliminating that the some shooting candidate is like one possible scenario. The other possible scenario that is going for it, even while like the some shooting candidate is hearing that announcement that of like an approximate like mother shooting candidate like eliminated like at that point, even then like some shooting candidate. Even at that point, like some shooting candidate, like the first three things, probably refusing to like to do that, and the third absolute separation, like in trying to improve that maze of like the both shooting area, that while shouting out focus like not and then looking that introducing finding that exact hope that computer maybe as like time would be and computer maybe as like only 2 seconds if you are remaining at that point like computer maybe like to some security and then like finally while frantically and previously searching for purpose like another like finally making it to that room where like something him totally witnessing that and then eliminated so it was as well as well as like the mother sleeping candidates as well as like generally food enjoyment will be on the verge of elimination with that absolute extreme exhaustion and like at that point like the some sleeping candidates that's often witnessing just shocking shit is like the scenario that I'm and particularly like maybe like the it's like 2 seconds for me I'm looking right and the like time to over. And at that point it felt like I'm pretty relaxed without much at all like junkie at that point like collapsing from that exhaustion and like the sleeping candidates if you also and basically like at that point he seeing that the baby of junkie I felt like well like the scenario and everything. And that husband would be totally creating that extreme trauma. So thinking that the person speaking candidate is like the scenario that I'm looking for. So at that point, I was once the again will be over like a more than this will be a lot of like entering into that room and but the civilian network entering into that room and that one of them that carrying the baby, taking the baby away. And at that point, just when I'm looking like the Constitution candidate that totally going crazy and that I'm looking like at that point like the Constitution candidate like that's like one of the Instagram workers would be like showing up, walking towards like some Indian candidate to like eliminate him. At that point, I'm looking at some Indian candidate totally going crazy and like thing totally swinging his weapon doing that against media weapon and all over manner and basically eliminating one Indian worker as well as like badly injuring another Indian worker before like the group of Indian workers would be the remaining group of Indian workers would be that taking off like and eliminating like some Indian candidates like rather for that I'm about to go to okay, and by the to the so like I'm still with my working the end as for like that not a student candidate as well as like some student candidate that surviving like the fourth student especially that is the scenario that I'm looking at and my person. And my working theory and this where sitting on those for like so it's like elimination that I'm looking for that happening that was the game of that happening to it while doing the like trying to that particularly will be trying to like perfect and that junkie by the delivering that that so when you see that having to that fight up against that and depending on fight up against that multiple like team members it's like the scenario that I'm until like I'm just like critical like depending something in that so taking more and more the result like the point where like actually two team members and the simultaneously showing up to that role that's the scenario that I'm and at that point like while so it will be that taking on and eliminating one of that team member like the other team member and like at that point for the landing like attack on those and that way like and finding so that topic. Finally, something to let the conversation go and like choosing that topic that way getting taken off. It's like the scenario that I'm looking for. At that point, I'm looking that only still to get the map to for like scenario being at that point only 10 seconds remaining alone and a single thing number being from under that was and 10 seconds alone remaining. So like at that point, I'm looking like some switching candidate like with like an extremely in a bold manner like with like an extremely fetus is like shouting out that into that that we didn't now get anywhere near that generally like the scenario that I'm looking and like then like the another speaking candidate like totally walking up towards him and like basically at that point like that team member like eliminating stuff at that moment is like scenario like so that way the sacrifice of like some other speaking candidate to protect like junkies and specifically junkies like that scenario that I'm going to go with at that point definitely like would represent and also my during and questions right now as well like the same channel kids that can different like some different like still managing to like get all three keys of like the three shapes of like triangle, square and circle, and like and different then like like would be that running her way into that with like on her way back like I was taking a lot of things that is get like barely managing to like escape by sure like and basically like with all the great injuries like under like the shaman like at that point making it to that main exit door finally making it back once again to like that main exit door and like I'm doing like inserting all three keys and like as she will be like opening that main exit door like she will be managing that the moment she will be managing to like open that main exit door like at that point like she will be only saying that basically and that like finally she has survived the support to but like before she goes enter open and like trying to pursue the entering that entering through that or like something like that they love to end up with like other team member like at that point like landing just like attack on the fake shaman woman and like that way like the fake shaman woman like get eliminated right in front of like the open main exit door. It's like the scenario which like I'm looking at how like the fake shaman woman getting eliminated in like the very current top to get set to step in the scenario that I'm looking at right now and there's a great. Okay, so that leads my particular interesting right now as for that Goldman's to be candidate right now, taking selection less in front of like Thanos' front and like 21 guy. That leads my particular impression for like definitely while like that old man speaks into from like the corners like at that point itself like Thanos' front might have totally seen it. It's definitely my particular and yet like right now I'm the Thanos front of totally pretending and totally putting on that big tag to like totally to such an extremely villainous manner to that way to like instill as much as fear into like that old man's to get and like before eliminating it. That might be the case definitely like very much. So like I'm saying right now, Thanos is front like if we look in right now, mostly even like staying even sitting right next to like that eliminated player like and all the second even based in time and even based on time there would be quickly developing kind of from the when I'm fully aware that like that Coleman Squid Game candidate like is like right now will be taking with like elimination like uh about which like Thanos front with you like when I'm fully aware of like my boyfriend so like I'm just like right now for like the scenario being like in an extremely realistic manner like I'm just and Bitcoin like might have noticed that that old man like cheating from extra honors. It might have been only kind of from all that might have not been it's also like my personal membership. So that right now I'm looking like for like Thanos front like right next to like those that eliminated single floor player like I'm looking like right now like when Bitcoin that like selling Thanos front that that they are wasting time that like they have to go ahead that would be along the lines when Bitcoin that would be selling Thanos front. So like at that point, I'm looking like kind of like getting up and telling that then to the guy that like just like that is right like that like they are wasting time. So like I'm looking like at that point like kind of friend like getting up and like running away from them like scenario that and at that point I'm looking like the at that point I'm looking like that old man could be candidate like for like at that point totally feeling really thing that basically he had managed to that with his like fake actors but like I'm saying once he will be like slowly getting up and turning off to left our side at that point, like him getting that absolute shock of like basically seeing both Thanos friends as well as like the different guys standing right there. It's like the scenario that I'm looking at. At that point, like an humanistic manner, like I'm looking at Thanos friend, like and so as well as like the different guy like eliminating that whole mess to get candidate at that point. So we like only yeah, like the space that point. It's like the scenario that I'm supposed to protect and nothing there is something right now. Okay, so like the new method there was interaction right now. So like chosen by now being attacked by other team and while chosen by now spoken with the team and out of it. So definitely I'm thinking that it will make the difference. Currently elect another elect the team is definitely might not be very much. So definitely I'm looking like that is like current fight of that chosen versus that team that's happening outside of that group journey and like some other team and the main which is in like I'm looking like chosen after this fight like this current fight like chosen after definitely won't be not being able to like make it back towards like junk food or like one or two again like the scenarios like like my particular emergency for like this current fight with like children and this like strong team member I'm going to run like children the the scenario to be that children traveling our way into that children to managing to that or and defeat and eliminate that team members like the scenario like that. And so by the like I'm going children take a lot of injuries and I'm looking that by the time children will be for and defeating that team member and eliminated him, and that number like at that point Cho-ju finally feeling relieved that basically that she was managed to like get through that such situation. But like I'm saying like right considering the scenario being that for Korea as soon as like Cho-ju will be going and defeating and eliminating that team member and like once that Cho-ju will be like thinking of that Cho-ju will to like now get back to protecting that mother to game and then the rest of the Janki like Cho-ju eliminating that team member and would be about to get the control rather than that considering it was being at that point that like right behind like children I'm considering at that point for them to be like a red team member, another red team member and like considering at that point that red team member like straight away like 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 using that weapon like they will eliminating children with like the scenario that children not even seeing that attack coming at all. With like the scenario and that position being how that children will be getting eliminated just like given the scenario that is the perfect and like the rate and okay, so like definitely my vegetarian question right now is that is right now children might be totally assuming that like that second for team member got death of that scene. Children like eliminate the other team member and rampage. When in actually like I'm thinking that team member might be still second for team member will be still hiding nearby and like waiting for like an opportunity that waiting for like an opening where like children would be having some guard down for him to like attack. So it's that might be like today actually might be today. So like the scenario that I'm just talking for like right now with like children right now seeing like where she was standing right there like the exit door like I'm looking like right now with like children trying to like insert all three of like the keys into that exit door like I'm still like I'm looking at scenario being right as like children do inserting like for third key like I'm looking like at that point like that exact but team member like turning back and like basically been stealthily attacking so the rocket is like personality better and that attack on the channel body and lot of like serious injury to that so the first definitely might go to the rain but for that the point right now for like so say the significant injury on that attack yeah like so is struggling halfway into like eventually totally still more current that for a team member as well. Yeah, like I'm gonna even through that struggle up when children taking lot of injuries and everything that still children starting her way into that sport scoring and defeating and eliminating that second team member as well. That point of like person are that number five. So and I'm looking by then through like the collective injuries like I'm like so you to like quite a to walk at that point is like person are better. So yeah, like I'm like suffer taking in all that pain like still that children would be that still while going through that pain like still so when you'll be like struggling halfway to all that combination and so will be making it back to that current like journey and like the middle of the candidate like that section which gave me definitely my personal area. So in that way like I'm doing it then collectively that making it that towards that acceptable to that scenario better. So like at that point I'm going that it being that soldier by then would be like so badly injured that I can look at that point for to be like that must to be a candidate that to be like using like the keys and trying to like open the door. And I'm looking that at that point like I'm looking being like the most skilling candidate who would be like attempting to like open the door with the three keys then and Janki standing right behind her while holding on to like that with JD. And I'm looking back into the shows what that would be you know standing behind the like the scenario that I'm looking at. So at that point I was looking like and I'm looking like so maybe being on the guard like going learning from that I think injuries and so like just maybe standing uh, behind them while turning, while standing and while looking towards like the opposite side to like ensure that basically that like Janvi and like the student candidate is like able to like pass through like the set of safety. So like at that point I'm just like multiple like team members like running and rushing through that area at that point is like the scenario that I'm doing. So like I'm looking at children with the remaining point that for like I'm pretty sure that totally sacrificing to that totally save that John Keith and like the way and like three candidates just like talking out that that way. The team members like straight away that understand like they're being like four and maybe three or four of them were like them totally surrounding children and they did them all attacking together and basically that resulting in like children like of being plastic and like children getting eliminated is like what's not that I'm looking for. So that then and because I never going to see neither junkies nor update ever again because like I'm looking at junkies spelling the individual guy all the harsh words that basically that's the last thing junkies want will be so like son, not to that mean to be turned out to be like the taking off from power would be that the last thing that country would be along the lines of like an country was trying that would be like an extreme generation and like would be shouting out to like then people then at that point of like scenario that I'm like so like at that point like that absolute feeling of that shame and guilt and regret all that will be happening for like 20 point guy and then maybe like 20 point guy down just like won't be able to like be just like head straight at that point with all that emotion. So like I'm looking that at that point I'm looking like Thanos friend like okay would be getting enraged, like especially with like Thanos front right now. It would be more like having that like absolute feeling of that trust towards like Pentagon guy or like I'm something like Thanos front like won't be taking that step name and whatever. So like that never friend Thanos front getting extremely enraged with like and on top of that like Thanos front would be feeling extremely positive as well about like the Pentagon guy. So like I'm different like uh so like I'm looking the person I'm looking and the preparing the scenario being like generally totally telling this and shouting out to that Pentagon guy right. So depending on that point, Thanos front like telling that Pentagon guy that like he will like teach Janti a lesson and like that way like Thanos front like straight away rushing towards like Janti to like Janti like the scenario that I'm like and right then I'm looking like Pentagon guy attacking Thanos from behind is like from scenario that I'm doing. And that attack like that making the Thanos front like from scenario that I'm doing and that way Thanos front collapsing and falling to like the ground and basically Thanos front like only uh, in that absolute pain and only being unable to like move at all like the scenario that I will pray. So the same like the policeman to the right now that the individual guy for the native chosen like I'm differently since like Junkie Charlie knows it's like by now it's like only when I'm aware that like the individual guy have like farm like for yeah already. So like I'm definitely like Junkie right now like opportunity with like elimination of like chosen by the individual guy that Junkie will be probably be able to like see like that extreme grief and concept in like the individual guy. It's definitely my very impression. So and that too with like the individual guy teaming up with like the front of Thanos, like I'm saying like that, I'm being that much, seeing that much being like more than enough for like Junkie to straight away like I'm position at that point like Junkie right now it's one percent Junkie straight away that absolute fear like I'm like up trying and that absolute fear up with that absolute rage as well like Junkie shouting out to like the NG gun guy that like basically uh, that basically she doesn't ever want to see like the NG gun guy again in her life. It's like the scenario that I'm referring. So like I'm definitely currently government regular right now that's kind of shouting out to the NG guy that basically if like after like the box to if like she makes it to that exit and think that after like the vote to get through the voting that if she makes it back to like the real world that and at that point, I'm just trying like for junkies and still like you know, the Indian candidate like person being shocked at seeing that I chosen that collapsing and usable for it and basically get eliminated. So like at that point, I'm trying like the other Indian candidate like I'm looking at up with all that courage like I think like totally pushing junkie into like the open exit room at that point that right then like the Indian candidate would have opened the door to like pushing junkie into that exit door and right as like and right then like I'm in the facility candidate like shutting that door closed behind Johnny. Just like the scenario that I'm remembering. That way like Johnny and like the baby survives. So it's like the scenario that I'm remembering and like at that point itself like I'm looking like the moment like the looking candidate is shutting the door at that point I'm looking like each my preparation for like each of like the main exit door which like three keys are prepared like each of those main exit door I'm looking like would be might be Amazon having like an auto lock system where like Amazon like once like three keys are used to like open that switch off and basically once that exit door is like shut at that moment itself like Amazon like the door might be getting auto lock is like the scenario that I'm doing. So that like red team members won't be chasing after like blue team members who would have left through the main exit door would have completed that experience that to going after going even through like the chip law to not have like the team member even go through like the chip law and chase after like the blue team member even after they would have completed like the game and try to like eliminate them like to prevent that number then definitely compared to that cannot on the so like the moment that way that mother can be pushing gently through that exit door and that into shutting that door behind her. At that point, just take the dog to the corner dog, and I'm going those remaining 13 numbers like at that point, like eliminating up at that point, that's that question out there. That way, like Jackie and like the way to survive. like the like the scenarios that I'm looking for, like mental scenarios that I'm looking for right now and legendary and my very emergency spotlight the individual that is the fun fight because then making it to like the room of Jansi like they might have seen that like the main exit door and like children have open just now it's definitely my very emergency so definitely I'm going to bring like so even after like Jansi like shouting out against like Jansi guy and telling him that he will never see Jansi ever again in his life anymore if like Jansi gets out exit out be along the lines like country would shouting. So like even after like then the guy would be attacking kind of front and that way would be saving justice like and different like even at that point I'm to like uh and I'm to bring at that point for like then the guy telling Junkie that like he will help them and basically get them to that exit and then Junkie can do what else he wants to see along the line like then different guy would be leading that Junkie. And I was bringing like Junkie straight away for two things. And basically like at that point I'm looking like Junkie straight away walking out uh, of that like the scenario and Gandhi along with like the Syrian candidate like and along with like the lady like Gandhi probably them like probably walking off of that home that point of the scenario that I'm so like at that point I'm like the individual guy like the things that can fall down like and like him just saying a single word to like Gandhi as she leaves that like the exit like the exact action of that exit just like the scenario that I'm that way like I'm looking like Janki not at all wanting an impact. Yet like I'm doing like that direction like I'm doing like Janki is definitely taking it and basically that way Janki as well as like really and like some other student candidate like making it to that exit home exit of area like to that exit areas like the scenario that I'm looking so like that way I'm looking like at that point like Janki as well as like the video and like the other student candidate like they will be like following that exact direction and will be walking towards like the exit like I'm like even from a distance like I'm like then people die will be carefully watching them and like will be ensuring that they will like scenario ceremony and that will like done to like the months to get it like they will taking it to like exit or like the scenario ceremony and that also still be remaining in like it's like open like stage like the scenario ceremony so that way the mother that way like then he along with like the baby entering into that exit probe and like I'm right as like the Syrian candidate is still the role have been looking about to step up put into like that exit room. Like I'm looking at that point, like I was kind of leak that some of the candidates like at that point was remembering about like confirm and they will be taking that feedback in and looking like at that point like the Syrian candidate like telling Janti to definitely like in like the next voting like to definitely vote to definitely against and definitely to like never ever and telling advising Janhi to like never ever come back again into like against our and basically like even if it's like such an extreme struggle out there in like the real world for like Janhi to like still to find a way to survive and like take a good care of JD like and looking like the masculine candidate like and like pushing them well and like saying all this to them and basically at that point like the masculine candidate will be like not entering into like that so and will be running back to like the game with like personality that I'm looking for. So like at that point I'm doing that thing like such an absolute shock for Janti who would out totally forgot about like the thinking and some as well that playing like the games that so like and that way that something like some of the singing candidate like basically returning back to like the games or using like the exit room and return back to like the games to like ensure and looking like at that point like I'm looking like the singing candidate won't be having like absolutely no hopes at all of like being able to like survive all by herself yeah like I'm looking like her only intent would be to like at that point would be to like and I'm looking like her as well would be like absolutely struggle and conquer that definitely that like with sort of and definitely she would be like knowing how some how to well that like she would be absolutely certain that like uh uh the sun would have even by now like and number two by then like time would be so short like so that the Syrian candidate would be absolutely certain that like even by then that different Syrian candidate would have definitely not been able to expect himself to that eliminate many of like the floating numbers would be along the line like the number Syrian candidate would be absolutely certain so like intent behind the running back would be to like only instant to do one single thing that would be to like definitely proper to like ensure like the survival of like her son by having her that make somehow manage to like make it to her son and basically then to have a that while holding on to that weapon like this that way to that to make it possible for like the son that way while like she would be holding onto like the son's like weapon like while the son would be holding onto like weapon for her as well to hold on to that very same weapon and that way to like that way for her, even though it will be such an extreme struggle, like I'm putting even through such a manner to like ensure that like her something candidate like survive like the box to get would be like the intent with which like I'm different like the non-suiting candidate will be refusing that to make her to enter like the exit of this like the scenario that I'm like that way like as like the non-suiting candidate all by herself would be like would be feeling that absolute fear yet like I'm putting like her determination to like make to save herself like I'm definitely giving her like courage to like keep going on but like I'm putting like still like she would be like really searching for some studying candidate like and like maybe her at that point like even feeling that fear to the extent that like she might even and something at that point time would be so outside like her maybe even shouting out like the name as well to that way have some be able to like make it towards her before like any other studying candidate. So also like a possibility that I'm looking for it. So definitely so that like she would be able to like help save her son and help him survive the support to real. So like that we have to maybe like the most frequent candidate like shouting out and calling for like the name of son at that point like the scenario that actually but like I'm doing like instead of son like I'm doing like some son would be like at like way more distance of like a location within that game itself. So like I'm doing like of shouting like I'm on the attention of like and that's writing another right to be a candidate is like the scenario that I'm looking and like that to be a candidate I'm also putting like uh at that point, like I'm different from that, like the screen getting cut and the beginning, that the next thing that I'm looking for, like an announcement happening to have like the sun putting candidate, like time would be about to be over and basically the candidate will be banned and waste and basically would be at that point that maybe you'll be shouting out just like for just like all those names. But like I'm doing at that point, like I'm doing like an announcement happening that as for like the exact number of the Australian candidate as like the eliminated was like the scenario that you can and my category and question right now. And that way I'm definitely protecting like even though in like the person like definitely even though even though Trojan sacrifice like Trojan has found like this and even though in like the person I'm definitely protecting like the Indian guy might have seen that like exit door that like children has opened like might be the case still like still it will be that uh junkie along with like the lady and also that will be that entering and making it out of like the fourth people and surviving like the fourth game is like definitely the even the scenario set in this place. And I'm looking like still thinking the manual plan is for like so much would be candidate that decision to that refuse to that exit door. So something in like as well as like something candidate that usually get eliminated is like the scenario that I'm looking for like unnecessary and much. Okay, so that definitely my very question right now is for like the most candidate right now. That's why you wanted to then find that exit door solely to that sale junkie and then the baby back and definitely right now for that scenario to that like after going right now as like currently along with like one of the the moment they were just stepping out of like that hole they were hiding in that at that point then I'm looking like delivering to the like then you going back that they did see standing right outside that room where they were hiding the cinder fire. It's like the scenario that I'm looking but like by now then you going die would have only after taking and leading that Thanos sprint away from that big one chance who was hiding in that double point that then the guy might have straight away like from behind might have attacked like the Thanos sprint and might have badly injured like Thanos sprint. And that was in like the person like I'm between like Thanos sprint to feel at some location of the that then guy put out attack like Thanos sprint. Through that absolute then like Thanos sprint that might have taken that 6 levels of injuries through that attack and Thanos sprint will be like on the floor the bad perceived in the reason that only unable to make okay that the situation of like Thanos front right now is like the scenario that and that would be when like and that way would be how like I'm definitely putting that Minso coach that okay right now going crazy with that of like eating that two things on like the chain of that Thanos like I'm definitely Minso is like frantically going around within that both Stukian maze they can area like I'm bringing something as like time would be about to run out like but trying like Thanos but even though bad danger like they might be maybe thinking that like they still maybe being able to like survive like uh, that like if that once like the time would be over like maybe if he plays like the cinema workers might provide some sort of like a treatment to that and to that Thanos trying to get on the night like Thanos trying to do that danger and unable to move at that point would be hoping for like I'm doing as like maybe as like when 10 seconds numbers then maybe would be remaining alone or like by only 20 seconds would be remaining alone like at that point would be one number for like so probably would be seeing like Thanos friend like badly injured and lying on floors like the scenario that at the price. So like I'm thinking at that point like Thanos friend like totally seeing Minzu and like Thanos friend like totally pleading to that Minzu to like save him. So it's like the scenario that I'm doing. So like Minzu would like see the space like I'm without even corresponding that without even saying a word like Minzu would like see the space like basically put that absolute stare towards like Thanos friend. Like I'm doing Thanos friend at that point. And I was thinking at that point like Thanos friend like basically made it feel praise like the favor of like Minzu as like praise. So like I'm doing maybe at that point as like Minzu will be getting closer and closer towards like Thanos friend. He will be lying on the floor badly injured and unable to move. At that point is when I'm looking at Thanos friend would be like not going to like the chain of Thanos around like Mitsu's neck at that point. It might be the case and like the scenario that I'm going. But like at that point like Thanos friend like getting shocked and like realizing what might have happened to that Mitsu. And at that point I'm looking like Mitsu. And at that point I'm looking like Mitsu and then extremely uncontrollable and crazy and enraged and like into this and that. So at that point that would be eliminating Jack Thanos friend. Who would be that probably extremely terrified during that moment of his like elimination by Vinci is in that typical scenario that I'm going to take in my position. That's good at the fundamental difference from the different ones that the Manchurian candidate as well as Johnson, that they will be stepping out of their hiding room. At that point, is like them finding that then people like that standing right outside of that road, guarding them. It's definitely like the scenario that I'm looking. So like at that point, from the like Johnson will be getting extremely feeling extremely embraced towards like the Pentagon guy and wouldn't want anything to do with like the Pentagon guy at all. And but the pen like Johnson most likely at that point telling like the Pentagon guy to lad to never even come close to her or like even see or like even talk to them. So get out like start shouting out to like the Pentagon guy. And I was the that get like I'm that they will be walking away from like the Pentagon guy either like the Pentagon guy telling them as for like the direction that they should take, not like for them to like make it to like better. Or like I'm looking like Pentagon guy. So or like I'm looking like Pentagon guy following the regardless of that you could be telling Pentagon guy like Pentagon guy. But maintaining a bit of a tiny bit of like a difference still following them while it was absolutely determined to like ensure like the perfection of like the and like the baby until they make it to like they say those like things scenario that about the member is like these methods very impressive right now. The page shaman movement as well as like all that's being ended right now, finally making it to like the exit into like opening like the exit door like right now for scenarios to be like from like the door behind them like more than one team members like rushing into that so it's like the scenario where so like at that point since like it's like the shaman movement that's like entering into that exit through that exit door entering first like and so preferring like the shaman movement like at that point like to save herself like the shaman movement like straight away the fake shaman movement like straight away like pushing like the door back trying to like close the door of like that exit uh and like basically that way like the shaman movement trying to like put like the old man away from like the door and basically away from entering into that room exit room is like the scenario that I'm doing in that way like to that push like I'm and as like the old man will be struggling to like push open that door and escape into like that exit room that I'm looking like right before that like I'm looking like the red team members like will be landing the attack on like the old man. So like that way like the old man is like strength and then straight away like the summon one like with all the strength like pushing like the door uh all the way back to closing like the door and that way like I'm looking like the door will and almost like they having that auto lock feature to it. So like the moment the shaman movement will be closing that door like the auto lock happening and basically that way that old man should be candidate getting eliminated at that point by like the red team members while like just by such an extreme narrow manner like I'm feeling like the shaman the fake shaman movement like surviving the fourth billion like scenario that I'm making and I'm looking very interesting right now. So like definitely my very impression right now that for like the government to gain candidates and the trial of like the fake shaman movement and from right now for like into showing up I'm looking at right now the fake shaman movement protecting right now which is only coming up with strategy to like control Minsu and totally that way to like use Minsu to like basically to defend herself while she would be like trying to like make her way back into like the games trying to like basically while she will be totally hoping that one of them like the eliminated blue players lying around like might have like that one single key that like that's like made her for like the big channel even right now to like open that main exit door. Since like the old man cooking candidate has only like taken only a single choose by the train like the big channel. That's the scenario that I'm doing that way. Like I'm looking right now for like the big channel right now freaking mental and telling mental uh, that basically that she will help she has the power to help mental find out find like the person that mental is like looking for that way like I'm like probably that way using a tracking mental and basically and like her also telling Minso that that Minso has to like protect her kid that Minso wants her to like find like only she can help Minso find like the person Minso is like looking for and if like she has to be able to like help Minso out to like find the person that Minso is looking for then Minso has to like ensure her protection will be along the lines that from all the other red seeking candidates would be along the lines of that they're tracking and controlling nature that one is at the scenario. So like that way, like the fake shaman like shutting back into like the games and like that way like into totally different that and definitely look like into in like a crazy kind of state like I'm so right now it's just strong. And I'm looking like that way into that protecting like the fake shaman from that uh, multiple times from that other team members who do that attempting to like eliminate like protection like scenario that I'm looking at. So like then I'm looking finally like while like, another right team member would be trying to attack like the protection at that point as well like so while into and that right team member would be having that struggle of like a fight like I'm looking like during this time like I'm looking like the protection who finally managing to find like that single missing key that like only needed for like pick someone who wants to like exit like some finding that from like one of like the eliminated blue players that would be like nearby that was enough so definitely I'm going like have getting that final key and at that point itself like have straight away betraying Minzu and like have totally straight away like feeling has looked overjoyed and thinking that like finally she has done it that like she right now will be definitely able to like uh, make it to like the exit and lead like and survive like the both will be along the lines in like joyful and excited manner like and when totally at that point will be rushing towards like the main exit of like the scenario that when you say main exit of like the scenario that I'm doing. But like I'm looking at the time by the time like she will be making it to that home where like the main exit door is like I'm looking there while she will be like making it to that room that's getting like the biggest surprise because like at that point I'm looking at her finding an eliminated blue team member like lying on the floor of that room as well as like a bunch of like red team members like like either two or three red team members in that room because like they during that time like they would have only just eliminated that blue team member who might have who might have tried to like run and escape from that and might have reached that room and they might have gotten cornered and might have gotten eliminated by those multiple red team members might have been what might have happened. So like that way like once like the big shaman will once again finally would be Pokemon who would be at that point. She was only feeling hopeful, but like her getting that final vicinity and then basically her like by the time she was making it to that very exact road, like I'm doing the her that being like her seeing like getting that unexpected extreme surprise, shocking surprise with like her seeing like more than two like team members in that who were like exit or final exit or which is the scenario that I'm doing. So like I'm doing that way at that point on this product, her like the really trying to like run even though the exit door will be right there behind those like multiple team members like she will be having that fine fee as well as still like during like the team members with weapons like and during that which is only scary that big shaman at that point at that point would be like only screaming and shouting help at that point and I was like her totally running away from that room and trying to like save her but like I'm depending her being chased after and finding getting captured and getting eliminated by those multiple writing numbers like the scenario that I was able to copy and make it again. Okay, so let us leave my book very present right now as for like Dae-ho right now trying at the most different something to like stand on about like about the marine like even though everything that like Dae-ho right now will be fantasy and telling stand on will be the truth. Especially my book get like I'm like even this like confession of that Dae-ho number trying would be most likely the plan B of that Dae-ho if that unlike the case that anyone finds Dae-ho is definitely and another case is definitely if like someone finds Dae-ho it's definitely by the so definitely like hiding behind that door might have been Dae-ho's like plan A that way to like manage Dae-ho to like manage like escape from like someone but like I'm thinking since like the plan B of Dae-ho might have been if like someone still ends up finding Dae-ho, hiding behind that door. Then for like Dae-ho to like execute his like plan B, and that another thing like would be this like confession strategy where like everybody like definitely the line part about like being like Murray and everything that would be all the truth that they hold the same. Get like another thing Dae-ho right now through this like confession would be hiding his like uh it's like strategy to like take it down and eliminate Sancho. It's definitely right now. It's definitely my favorite images. Which listens like Dae-ho, while Dae-ho was like last shown like Dae-ho had like a weapon with him. Like I'm definitely that Dae-ho right now through his like nothing confliction like I'm different. His Sophie would be the strength would be a fake act due to like a certain extent of like that would be like even though there will be that genocide of like Dae-ho, there will be also that fake part of like Dae-ho as well, which might be like desperate to like do anything to like survive. And that way, like I'm going this contestant definitely will be like a fake acting like they hope to like that way trick Sanjeon into like dropping Sanjeon's job where like they hope at that point will be planning on like losing like quickly bring out his like weapon and trying to like eliminate Sanjeon. This would be like the plan B strategy of take definitely my book so like I'm going definitely like as like with like they go right now confessing to like Sanjeon that way getting signed on the striker like a without necessarily that or like they quickly pulling out his like weapon and trying attempting to like eliminate Sanjon's like of the venom. So like I'm believing in that attack of like Dae-ho, example going to happen like I'm between Sanjon taking a certain extent of that injury is definitely going to get like I'm between like Sanjon probably still or Dae-ho like the scenario that I'm between and I'm between like Sanjon at that point would be even more feeling and on top of like the zoned out state of like Sanjon getting even more enraged at that point and Sanjon on the different like business weapon like about to like eliminate table like the scenario that I'm looking and info at that point that realistically would be like only would be like a realistic enthusiastic manner would be like close to like the screen like only waiting for that moment where like Sanjon would be like destroying his own ideology by for survival to see to witness Sanjon eliminating Trejo for like Sanjon survival would be along the lines like that way Sanjon destroying his own ideology like basically in both considering that as like the phenomenon would be close to like the screen for that moment. But like I'm feeling like as like Sanjon would be about to land land Sanjon strike on like Trejo just like the weapon like a right before that like at that very last second I'm looking that Sanjon totally would be snapping out of it and basically like at that point Amazon finally like the things that like Dae-ho right now in like the current confliction of Dae-ho that the thing that Dae-ho confessed to like Sanjon about and Dae-ho being not being a marine and Dae-ho being so afraid and like Dae-ho looks the fact that Dae-ho did all this so that like Dae-ho solely with the only intent that like Dae-ho stood that was like the fight to like totally survive in like this good games like and different like that thing that confession that Dae-ho said to like Sanjon but only just finally properly registering in like Sanjon's mind only at that very last second. And that way, like Sanjon only stopping himself and he that way, like Sanjon not at that, not at all, even injuring at all as like the scenario that I'm in that way, like I'm that moment, like I'm like Sanjon snapping, totally snapping out of it, snapping out of like Sanjon's like zoned out state and like that way, like I'm like at that point, I'm looking Sanjon not only would be like forgiving Dae-ho, but like I'm doing Sanjon or even deciding to like help Saigon at that point finally being able to like understand Dae-ho and Dae-ho's like situation and using Saigon deciding to like definitely that yeah, at that point like one like Sanjon would be snapping out of it like Sanjon would be absolutely would have fixed in his mind that like definitely that Saigon definitely would be getting is not going to like eliminate another eliminate us to get candidate to like survive like the possibility. So like I'm looking at that point Sanjon like he's fixing in his mind that like that he would definitely be getting eliminated towards like the end of like the first in like the first game only. So along the lines of like final conclusion kind of like a decision that I'm looking like Sanjon coming down to. So like I'm looking Sanjon at that point deciding to like basically to at least with like the remaining time Sanjon have left like for Sanjon to like put it all the effort to like ensure that like Dae-ho make that Sanjon saying to like help Dae-ho to like the point of like Dae-ho being able to like make it to like fix it be along the lines like Sanjon of like a decision that Sanjon will be taking at that point. Because like there will be a certain extent of guilt as well happening within like Sanjon at that point uh, connecting to that connecting to that Dae-ho or like misunderstanding Dae-ho. You also while Sanjon was in like zoned out waiting, you also along the lines of like the realization or like a feeling that Sanjon will be having. She can take kind of like feeling as well that Sanjon will be having at that point. It's also definitely my favorite. So like at that point, I'm looking like what's this like moment where like Sanjon she is snapping out of it and stopping himself from eliminating Dae-ho. Like, at that point, I'm looking definitely for like would be only like the command who is only close to the screen would be getting extremely enraged. Like I'm looking a visible that body language reaction from that input. At that point, that like the scenario that I'm doing. I mean, like, info at that point would be like basically frustrated of like Sanjon Rocky, Sanjon's like absolute boldness in his like decision to like protective like ideology, even uh, even at any cost, like the scenario that I'm looking at. So like that way, info feeling once again deep down in the already info will be like deep down feeling threatened and intimidated and by like Sanjon's like ideology that totally threatening and challenging his ideology being by Sanjon's ideology is the opposite like Inho's ideology and everything mobilization. So like on top of that, like seeing this as well on the at that point, the that feeling of that being threatened like that only increasing within like the frontman in that particular scenario that I'm looking at that sort of thing in that being that ending up being visibly frustrated at that point, like the frontman being visibly frustrated at that point. So it's like body language is like the scenario that I'm looking at. And definitely I'm going to still thinking to my future ambition that like from that point on for like time on topic that devoting like the remaining time that he has left to thoroughly to help people make it through like things. But still I'm looking like as like time will be about to run out like I'm looking the people like I'm looking that but Sanyon will be trying to like protect Dae-ho from that when they will do almost close to like exit and like by Sanyon will be like so that absolute effort will be trying to like protect Dae-ho from like and the other team member like I'm looking at that very last second I'm looking like accidentally that Sanyon's like arm by holding the weapon like swinging around and setting it like and by sheer action like Sanjo uh, ending up eliminating Dae-ho. So in that whole clash between like Sanjo and like another team member, so like the scenario that and that way like I'm feeling like Sanjo for Sanjo getting like the next biggest shot and basically that way through that accidental elimination of that Dae-ho by Sanjo and that would be how Sanjo will be ending up surviving like the most good as well. This is like feeling the scenario that I was about to write and my personal theory and yes, so like definitely my theory question right now with that and example as well as like some of the thinking candidate like making it to like text it or the last like some thinking candidate as well making it there like definitely trying right now for like the scenario being like some of the studying candidate right now itself like opening the door and basically like telling that Jan to like the door and basically that way Jan entering that door was like scenario that I was showing and like that way Jan and like the daily survival like the game about games like the scenario that I'm and then like I'm looking like the whole interaction like extremely emotional interaction happening between like the non-studying candidate as well as like the non-studying candidate as like time of their running score for sure something different like the non-studying candidate definitely telling like definitely I'm whispering like at that point like the non-studying candidate like with like would be like totally crumbling like I'm looking like him totally telling like right and basically him totally most likely telling the non-studying candidate that basically that he couldn't do it that he couldn't do it like I'm looking like at that point, him telling that someone to take candidate that like she should as well like take that exit thought and just leave and that she should like live on would be along the lines like for some to be a candidate at that point will be telling like someone to be a candidate. So like at that point I'm looking like maybe for like someone to be a candidate like slapping like with some to be a candidate and I'm looking like time would start running so fine so and I'm looking they would be during like this interaction between like the emotional interaction between like different candidate and like the candidate happening while in like the background of like whole lot of dreams of like almost a great number of the players getting eliminated. It's like the scenario that I'm looking so like when at that point for like time will be seriously short and like the most speaking candidate will be starting to like tell like to some to game candidates and like that along the lines of like there's no point for like the most speaking candidate like survive if like it's like something that will be along the lines of the also get candidate telling like this and looking and then that means starting to like trying to like convince like the something candidate to like extend out just like weapon that sees like only in the arm and when at that point like something candidate will be shaken while holding the weapon and like the mother civilian candidate at that point holding on to like the arm of like the some civilian candidate who will be like holding on to the weapon and basically the mother civilian candidate telling the some civilian candidate to that to do it like basically but like the mother civilian candidate at that point would be like trying to like pull like the arms of like the some civilian candidate it's like the uh, scenario towards not look like the scenario that I'm looking and definitely I'm looking some speaking and definitely even though shaking like you'll be using all of the force to like definitely not allow that to like happen. It's like the scenario that I'm doing and like the most speaking candidate would be like repeatedly trying to like tell like the some speaking candidate that along the lines to like definitely what she would be doing is like the right decision uh to do right thing to do and basically I'm looking her repeatedly trying to like convince like some speaking candidate like eventually I'm looking like her getting like totally frustrated and like yeah and her as well starting like panic like time would be extremely getting as like time would be like extremely getting short, like I'm suddenly like it's reaching like 20 seconds usually, and at that point I'm putting the mouth putting candidate starting like shout out at like something candidate like in an angry manner and telling him to like totally do it, and they will feel like something candidate will be using all the strength to like totally to prevent that from himself from doing that is like the scenario that I'm looking. So like I'm putting like scenario being like while only 10 seconds will be remaining. I'm putting it being at that point that I'm looking like even while like the some swinging candidate I'm doing, then while only 10 seconds would be like remaining when some swinging candidate with lag still refusing to like pay this like person scenario that I'm doing. And at that point I'm going to try like in that exact location, like another red team member like basically running towards that exact location, having to like run towards like that exact location and like that red team member at that point like seeing like some of the swinging candidate and him so running towards them towards like the North candidate to like eliminate before before like the Sun Korean candidate like the scenario that I'm looking. So like at that point like I'm looking like the Sun Korean candidate the most Indian candidate will be turning back and will be seeing this like him running towards them. So that is like a weapon is like the scenario that I'm looking. So like at that point I'm looking like the Macedonian candidate, like time would be like less than 10 seconds at that point. It's like the scenario that I'm doing. And the Macedonian candidate at that point, like basically the that absolute seriousness, like shouting out to like some Indian candidate would be like trembling of that absolute fear and like would be and crying and all that. Like so like I'm going that way, like the Macedonian candidate like holding firmly onto like the arms of like the Indian candidate Cho-ju, holding the weapon and just doing it and basically the Macedonian candidate using all of her strength and all of her force and basically doing it and that way like I'm looking that elimination of that multiple candidate that way happening, and like I'm looking that being extremely even more being not only extremely painful for like the multiple candidate, but also would be extremely painful for like some candidate. That's like this scenario that way like I'm like the most candidate like through sacrifice like saving like the some candidate, and that way like the some candidate actually surviving like the fourth skill game, but like still I'm looking like at that point, like though he will not survive like the fourth game, like him I'm looking at that point like crying and like screaming out in like pain of like basically seeing like the last skill candidate in like eliminate state. Like the scenario that I'm looking. So like even though he will not survive like the fourth game, like the something candidate at that point would be feeling as if that he has lost it or would be along the lines I'm looking the fourth candidate feeling absolutely destroyed. So it's like the scenario that was the in that way, like I'm looking right now for like definitely for like speaking candidates who think surviving like the for to get while like not seeing candidate to get like scenario. And definitely I'm looking like once like some speaking candidate in the present like some speaking candidate showing up to that exact ending up in that exact location where like some speaking candidate and Janju is in like I'm looking right now. My mother candidate definitely, even though she might have been absolutely confident that definitely so some speaking candidate not being able to like do it, like not being able to like eliminate like like another like speaking player. Like I'm going definitely like the one speaking candidate don't realizing that like I'm going like her feeling absolutely proud as well of that her success also that make my brother MLG like yeah, so that's definitely my second career project right now. So basically, even though like some people can right now like here and then try to do that extreme of that to the point of wanting to like eliminate champion like the most candidate that can like do stuff instead like I'm definitely still I'm looking like with that absolute absolute like or selfishness like coming out of like some big candidate while in like faced with that absolute extremity of like fear like the different still I'm looking like naturally like the something candidate with the just throw form with the like that of like that absolute self definitely my sister and so like even by the something candidate it's basically like even says that basically as if that actors if like he wants to like eliminate Junkie that I'm going still think would be having that his score would be that of looks like that he simply won't be able to like do that at all in actuality even if he actually attempts to definitely my finger. It's like he wasn't able to this in that time even if like the time is short like everything still like some candidate like his proposal would be that of like absolute self-confidence that he simply won't be able to do that at all. Definitely my good saying. So definitely even with like the mother speaking candidate right now, totally saying that the some speaking candidate to that choose up instead that impossible and that even though that with all that fear that totally like being candidate right now while being faced with that extreme fear that we are still impossible like the some speaking candidate not being able to be selfish is like the scenario that I was looking that way like I'm looking that the slowly I'm looking like as that time will be tracing, trying to be getting short run for like understand that the amount of student gap that like I'm getting to the forced to like actually having to like have no other option but to like force like for some student candidate to like do elimination is definitely my thing that I mean. Definitely I think like it's reaching a point where like we think that absolute struggle for like some other student candidate to even convince like the and make like the something candidate to do it, especially when they're doing everything. So like I'm looking that that is like the scenario that I'm looking for. Still I'm looking that for something candidate definitely surviving to like the elimination of like some Australian candidate. Still I'm looking that eventually things eventually ending up in such a situation where like it being that much of like an extreme struggle for like the Australian candidate eventually to like force like the Constitution candidate to uh, to make him do it. It's definitely that dangerous scenario. That I'm speaking on my booking relation. Yes, so that definitely my booking very preparation right now as for like Sangyong right now. So his own hands like eliminating the whole that way like Sangyong directly destroying his own ideologies and basically proving info right about the things info said about info ideologies. So like Sangyong doing all this like definitely from this point on, definitely for Sangyong to like never even towards like the end of the show, like I'm preparing Sangyong never having a return that to that genuine good intent that Sangyong had of like basically being that savior and to like save that the poor and innocent from like the civilians like that ideology of Sangyong that which like Sangyong right now through this direct uh, elimination of like Dae-ho would have definitely destroyed, especially my considering definitely from this point on like just like zoned out state of like Sangyong, which even after like Sangyong had already gone through like the Games back in 2020 and had lost Sangwoo and had gone through all that from of like losing Sangwoo, and even after that like usually the fact that like entering into like the 2024 Squid Games like and seeing that and totally finding out Jang Bae was in it like still like the fact that like Chan Yun who had already played like Squid Games in like 2020 and so they already knew what the Squid Games are like and who knew like the dangers that lie away in that Squid Games and that way who already had all that experience of like losing Sangwoo and was faced with that actuality of like that reality of like possibility of like losing Junpei as well. And yet like the fact that like that very same Sangyeon totally uh not being able to like move on from like losing Junpei to like the point of like Sangyeon right now ending up like even eliminating Dae-ho for that like I'm considering definitely right now I'm considering that Sangyeon like elimination of Dae-ho. I'm considering that like it being totally um, something that's like absolutely having like absolutely nothing to do with like Sangyeon's like initial good intent of like an ideology that Sangyeon had of like saving like the poor and innocent from like the civilians, like saving the lives of like the poor and innocent from the civilians. Definitely my opinion. And still the fact that Sangyeon wasn't even able to like at all understand Beethoven that actually that why Beethoven did everything that he had done. That basically to the Sangyeon not only like understand Beethoven to like the point of like right now Sangyeon even eliminating Beethoven like exactly from this point on Sangyeon definitely only the like current destruction of like Sangyeon's own ideology by Sangyeon itself right now. That direct destruction of that Sangyeon's own ideology by Sangyeon itself. And that I'm delivering from this point on being permanent and basically I'm delivering that will not happen return for like Sanjo towards like the path of good. So like all that like Sanjo's like ideology of like wanting like save like the poor and innocent from like the corruption and again like all that permanently being lost from this point on from like Sanjo's my perspective, my perspective. So like the current zoned out state of like Sanjo remaining with like Sanjo until like the variant white Sanjo will be eventually they're going to the framework in like the game of the slippering for like scenario being like it being info in like the outfit of like the frontman also by wearing like the mask is also the clean necessary that was the same thing of against like Sanjo in like this game. Definitely in that fight like I mean like considering being the game once again being like a 1 versus 1 fight to like to eliminate the select scenario that I'm looking. And that fight like I'm like Sanjon straight away, even with like info wearing like the front man outfit I'm looking like I think how did actually even entering into that fight against like Sanjon in that game with that absolute extreme confidence definitely Michael Driver. And that confidence will be directly connected to like Sanjon himself right now in like the course to game having destroyed just like ideologies and basically that way like info with family feeling stories right now definitely Michael Driver. That insecurity that deep insecurity that might have and fear that might have like depending how this like info might have been probably hiding from everyone. Might have been like the ideology of like Sanjong of like basically which like for thoroughly proposed like in ideology that basically that ideology of Sanjong might have been what might have felt for a thing that can go, but like Sanjong right now calling for like part and basically it's like Sanjong right now himself like the ending up like this point Sanjong's own ideology like I'm doing that from this point on I'm like info will be absolutely feeling realistically relieved and basically will be having that no more insecurities at all. So like I'm looking for like in this scenario to be like in that ecosystem game I'm looking like in hope facing off against like Sanjong with like info facing off against targeting without any, not even the remote of the insecurity at all, of fear at all, so like just scenario that happens. Like so, definitely able to bring that point like Sanjon calling out that info, yeah, calling out that like frontman's identity as the frontman is in fact info, which definitely might be able. Sanjon from the definitely being able to like tell that by like the dialogues that I'm just like at that point like from my info, even the like some of love like the and like some of like the scenario being like maybe it being so even before like in that fight like different like Sanjon even before Sanjon will be able to like through that fight even the Sanjon will be afraid to like I think will be probably or confidently in that fight against like Sanjon and like this game. So they absolutely or confident like Sanjon no matter what Sanjon does like Sanjon won't be able to like pull off like the mark of would be that absolute or confidence that he would have. Yet like I'm the scenario being and that fight between Sanjay and anything will be looking at the flickering. Even before like Sanjay will be pulling out at the master of info like I'm putting like while that fight will be progressing I'm looking like info it would be saying all sorts of dialogues to like Sanjay and I'm like for one of like the dialogues like I'm like info something messing up and actually ending up exposing info's like identity as like info. So like I'm going Sanjay catching one of those dialogues of like the front and basically that was the thing in that signed on finding out that like the identity of tech from minus yeah, definitely quite significant. And definitely I'm looking that yeah, even at that point the flavor thing for like Sanjon not being able to that say anything connected to that Sanjon's like initial ideology or anything and I'm looking like involved with recording of Sanjon of his like initial ideology and like basically involved with telling Sanjon that basically Sanjon himself has destroyed his own ideology and so info quite quickly along the lines like info will be that mocking even mocking Sanjo and his like ideologies like the scenario and everything. And at that point of the different for like a scenario being like Sanjo maybe even telling info that basically that like along the lines of like his info eventually like things will be ended up with like info ideology itself being right will be along the lines Sanjo will be telling info at that point. Then but when like Sanjo as well in like kind of like a tough and brilliant kind of manner like telling info that basically that right now Sanjon is like not playing like the Sujians to perfect like to save lives or like protect like innocent from like the Sujians but like Sanjon was like totally playing like the Sujians and right now even fighting info to like totally bring about to as like Sanjon to revenge for like taking away Sanjon like precious friends like Sango as well as like Jambe from like Sanjon like for the and for all the trauma like the Sujians had so far given to like Sanjon like to like the Sujians as well as like elected before Sujians like for all that like this current fight against like for Sanjon against like Info is Sanjon's like selfish revenge against like Info and like Sujians would be along the lines of the like in an African realistic manner, like a sign of telling info. And I'm looking like that from that point on, the different might be like the tide of like the fight between like Sanjon and info, those info changing. And I'm looking eventually Sanjon thoroughly overpowering and eliminating Sanjon himself, like most likely thoroughly. I'm looking like Sanjon himself not eliminating info, but like Sanjon thoroughly overpowering and defeating and badly injuring info to like the point where like info getting badly injured to the point of that info not being able to like move it out. So like I'm looking like at that point, like the villain Sigman or like Sanjon shouting out to like all the Sujian workers that will together there that slapping them and mocking them as if like they are afraid. Because like as per the coach, like the person who goes has to get eliminated and you go via the Sanjon asking all Sujian workers will be present there, monitoring that would be standing there and monitoring that game between like Conman and Sanjon that like it's like Sanjon asking like all those great numbers of Sujian workers they are afraid to like eliminate info things that please your mask will be along the lines and behind Sanjon will be mocking for Squid Game of the time. Still, assuming like at that point, like the Squid Game was like not that eliminating info like the scenarios that I'm looking at. So like at that point, I'm looking like either like the same way like the starting guy it got eliminated. I'm looking like info getting eliminated or like I'm looking like at that point, I'm looking maybe it's that Sanjon going through the more dark kind of like a realistic manner and basically Sanjon at that point that's only extremely realistic manner like eliminating info at that point is like also like an Indian positive scenario that I'm looking for. Like that way, like Sanjay totally like not deciding to like stop with that alone. Like even after that, like I'm to the next Sanjay totally from that point on deciding to like use all that extreme wealth that Sanjay had gained from like the a million like the living this again to like only not only that put on Sanjay that way not full satisfied at all with like putting an end to like the students in that memory alone, but like Sanjay deciding to like so travel all over like the world and basically to enter into like the civilians for like the world and usually that way to push and then and destroy like the civilian all of that's like taking place all over like the world solely for like Sanjon's own selfish reason of like basically wanting to like get revenge on like the civilians for like the for like taking like Sanjon's friends like Sangu as well as like Chelpe away from him as well as like all for all the trauma that the children have caused from like Sanjong alone. Like that way, like thoroughly zoned out and selfish Sanjong is what I'm trying to say. Like from this point on, the player getting it to the end of the episode, like on the Sanjong remaining in the like zoned out state. It's definitely the end of scenario that I'm also going to bring up right now and my behavior numbers.